Well, thanks everyone that is still hanging in there. We have a long meeting tonight, as you've noticed. A lot of good stuff, a lot of really important stuff. But some also really important results that we wanted to get out to the entire community. And just to give you a little bit of background on how this all started, when the board took over, we had a number of priorities, as all of you are aware, the most important one being the turnover from the developer to the HOA. And at that time, we realized that we didn't have a strategic plan. Taylor Morrison had strategic plans, which were basically based on selling houses and generating revenue for the corporation. So we realized that this was a need, but just didn't have the time to get to it right away. So I recommended, and fortunately my colleagues on the board agreed, that we should implement an ad hoc strategic planning group that could start to progress some of this work in building the strategic plan for our community. So we assembled the group, and as we first started meeting, we discussed the need to have the voice of the community. If we're going to build a plan that's for the community, we should hear from the community. We hear from some residents in the community on a regular basis, but we wanted broader input from more members of the community. So that's when we decided to launch the Strategic Planning Group Survey. So I want to start, before the group gets into it, I just want to recognize this group because they have done a tremendous job in developing the survey, in going through all of the comments, the findings, presenting to the board members, presenting to ICON, presenting to the various managers, assisting with helping us determine what the priorities will be for the 2021 budget planning. So they've been involved in a lot of time behind the scenes as well, sitting in with some of the homeowner liaison groups. So I want to give a big shout out. I have two of the members here with me. Cindy Wenban, who is now sitting in Steve Salamini's chair. Cindy is the chair of the group. And we also have Pravat Mazumdar, who is also going to be presenting as well. The other members of the group who also contributed greatly to this work is Tim Carnahan, Jim Payton, Maggie Randolph, and as the finance liaison, Frank Harris. So put your hands together at home and give this group a round of applause for the great work that they've done, and you'll see it here in just a few minutes. So next slide. Okay, so what we wanted to do tonight is kind of cover the results, give you some of the top line messages that came out of the survey, go through a little bit on the process, participation, some of the demographic information that was found in the survey, as well as the importance ranking and frequency of use findings. We'll also go through some of the amenities, service satisfaction and findings, key management messages and issues, and then what are we going to do next? So what are the next steps and actions that we're going to take, as well as the next steps and actions that ICON will take. And we'll also open it up for some Q&A time at the end. So just to give you an idea of some of the headline messages, first we had, next slide. Krish? Yeah, headline messages. We had a very high participation rate, and according to ICON, it's one of the highest rates of participation that they have seen, and Cindy's going to provide more details, but incredible interest and enthusiasm from the community to take the time to participate, and not just to check boxes and answer some questions, but to provide some really solid, candid input that is very helpful for us going forward. Very important is that overall satisfaction with the community is really high. There are some individual amenities that ranked a little bit lower in terms of satisfaction, but overall ranking within the community is very high. What came back as number one in terms of importance as well as dissatisfaction is home landscaping and maintenance. And I think a lot of members of the community guessed that that was going to come back as the number one issue in terms of importance and dissatisfaction. From food and beverage, what came back is that the Bahama Bar and the Culinary Center should complement each other. They each have sort of their own individual identities that they should, instead of compete with each other, they should complement each other. And then looking at the community infrastructure improvements that are needed, there are improvements needed in terms of access, safety, security, and lighting. And then from a golf perspective, some of the golf issues that came up is that the issues are very complex and in some ways, a lot of ways, are very divisive in the community. And there were very many conflicting recommendations when it came to golf. Next slide, please, Krish. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Cindy. She's going to walk through more on the process and the details.
Thank you, Sandy. Okay, for the survey process, we used SurveyMonkey online, and we began our confidential survey on July 13th, and we gave every resident 10 days to complete it. The goal was to help the board to understand the voice of the residents, as Sandy said, and the priorities for our community for our 2021 strategic planning and budget. And we had over 1,200 or 1,218 out of about 2,400 active members have responded. In fact, that gave us a 70% response rate, and almost half of those that responded in the first full day of the survey. So that shows the enthusiasm the residents had to share their comments. We also had over 400 residents that volunteered their contact information. Now, we did keep all of the contact information and names separate from our analysis, and it's completely confidential, meaning the names are not associated with any of your inputs. And we do appreciate everyone's valuable time and efforts because we received over 13,000 comments. And many of those comments are just golden nuggets of opportunity. Residents took a lot of time to put well thought out, well organized information and ideas forward. And I'm very impressed with those ideas because they can be taken to the next step. And ICON is also the department managers are looking at the comments and looking for opportunities. And finally, based on statistics, we have high confidence that our survey results are representative of the entire population. Next slide. Now, we've collected demographics in 9 separate areas so that we could sort the data, and we wanted to look for different ways to sort it to answer different kinds of questions. What we're reviewing with you today is the entire population of responders, but we can sort the data and look at different ways of deeper dives into the data. On this slide, we have 77% full-time residents, and 80% are between the ages of 55 and 75, and about 2/3 are golf members, 1/4 club members, and 11% are original resident members. Next slide. A few more ways to slice the data and demographics. We have 17% work full-time, and over half have been here 3 years or less. Next slide. And the final on demographics, we even looked at what street did you live on so that we could better pinpoint issues that would be geographical kinds of issues, like where there might be landscaping issues, drainage, roads, things of that type. Next slide. Okay. Prabhat.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? We're going to dive into this next phase of looking at the results. But before I do that, I just want you to flash back to you're actually taking the survey. So if you remember, we started out with some fairly easy questions, and then we got to this fairly difficult question about ranking 18 different items in a table. They were listed in a random order, so when a particular resident saw that question, it was not always in the same order. It was randomized to remove any bias. And we suggested a way to actually make that task easier. We said use a drag and drop process where you could actually move the important items to the top, the less important items to the bottom, and then so the middle ones would automatically sort of fall out. And then do a little fine-tuning of, what's number 1 through 6, et cetera, et cetera. A little bit of a challenging task, so we'll start with that. What we've got on this slide is the reporting of those results. So basically, across the top, you'll see 1 through 18. Those are the ranking of number 1, number 2 to number 18. And that what we've organized here is the various amenities, and we asked you to rank 18 different items, and the individual score. So if you look at the top cell, the very first item in the number 1 rank, so individual landscaping, as Annie mentioned, was a very high ranking. So it came up with a 26% of people said, that's my number 1 priority. If you drop down to the section on golf course, you'll see the relevant number there. The first item is 28%, right? So one could argue, well, 28% is higher than 26, so that's actually the most important item for the community. As we looked at that data, we said, no, there's something else going on. If you look at the top several ranks, 1 through 6, or 1 through even 3, there's a large preference, for example, in the individual landscaping, where a lot more people actually ranked that particular item very high within that top 6. Specifically, 78% of people ranked individual landscaping 1 through 6. That's 860-odd people, versus golf at 58 and 562. So in our judgment, that actually reflects a broader view of importance, and that's the definition that we've used. Overall importance being the way it's scored in the top 6 ranks. So given that background, the numbers on this slide, 1 through 9, rank the items in terms of that overall importance. Now, if you look at it at the top 6 or 7, there's no big surprise there. All of the individual landscaping touches pretty much everybody in the community, unless you're in the condos, and even there's an element of that. The 2 dining centers, the community infrastructure, and the golf course, okay? So those are the top ranked items, and then several in the middle. So the next slide will summarize that for you and show you the top 6, the middle 6, and the bottom 6, and how they ranked for all 18 items. So the message here really is the top 6, obviously, we'll focus a lot of attention on, but every item is going to get attention, as you'll hear later on in the presentation. An important dimension about the bottom 6 is that there are large numbers of people, still in the single digit and so forth, that ranked, for example, tennis or pickleball or spa as their number or as their high priority item. So there's a very small concentrated group of people for whom that is very important. So you've got to keep that in mind as well. Okay, moving on to the next slide, where we asked about frequency of use. Frequency of use was, we debated this as a team. We decided the way to ask the question was in the context of anticipated use in 2021. And the reason for that is we knew this was going to be used for the budget process going into 2021. And secondly, the history for the last several months with the COVID experience was basically difficult to define. Were you responding to the first few months or the more recent COVID experience? So we asked it in the context of 2021. Again, the scale here is from never to various degrees of usage, all the way up to very frequent usage, weekly or greater. And we've ranked the 18 items by order of importance to show you what that result looks like. So several things, again, a lot of data, but we'll call out a few things. The high usage items, Culinary Center, Bahama Bar, Golf Course, received very high usage rankings in the monthly or greater. There were several items that were much less used, and they sort of reflect the order of importance. For example, the tennis, spa, Messina pool, etc. So, and we'll get into that as we go into the individual items. One additional thing I want to point out on the golf course, because it comes up, it came up earlier today. There's going to be a whole discussion coming up from the board later. Golf is an interesting sort of a barbell effect of usage. There's 32% of people that never use the golf course. And by the same token, there's 32% that use it very frequently. And so there's a dichotomy of sort of usage on golf course. Important perspective to keep in mind. Okay, moving on to the next slide. We touched on this earlier, Sandy did, and Cindy did. So the feedback from residents, this was a very important part of the survey, in addition to the raw scoring of satisfaction and so forth. The ability to provide the group here, the board and the management company, with your comments. 13,000 comments. What we've arrayed here is the number of comments by question and just rank them from top to bottom. Now, I take away a couple of things from this. First off is, we touched on it quickly, I think Cindy did, there were 1,218 responses. So if you look at the first one, improve and enhance, there were 846 comments. So that's 2/3 of the people actually made some constructive comment about that particular question. The next one, 700 or so, very high level of engagement and feedback. So it's a very strong message about how actively people were responding to the survey. And another dimension is just, if you look at the top 3 board recommendations and the brand words which came at the very end of the questionnaire, those also got very high scores. And so it's just a testament to how people were engaged throughout the entire survey process. We did, as a group in the SPG, read every comment and synthesize it, and we'll talk later on in how that's going to be used in the future. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is a quick summary of the comments in the frequency of use question, or following the frequency of use question. We're going to dive into a lot more detail on this, but this was an early indication of the kinds of feedback in terms of why somebody was either using something frequently, an amenity or service, or not using it frequently. So it's an early indication of the kinds of feedback that we're getting. On the positive side, there was people have their own pools, the gym memberships. COVID was a big reason for explaining why they weren't using something. And on the improvement side, and you'll see this several times during the presentation, the various categories of amenities and some feedback along those lines. No surprises here. You'll see many of those as we go forward. Okay, next slide, and the next 2 slides actually, these questions came at the end of the survey, but we've moved them forward here to give you some framework or a reference point as to how you should look at the individual amenity ratings as we go forward in this presentation. So this question said, how satisfied are you with the overall amenities and services at Esplanade? Very strong response, 72% strongly agreed or agreed, so a very strong response. Some level of disagreement and some neither. And the comments, again, very strong positives, community lifestyle, lots of amenities available, friendly and professional staff. And by the way, there are several references already throughout the comments. Keep in mind, this was done in the first 2 weeks of July. ICON had been in place for 6 weeks or so. Lots of great comments already of the observations about how ICON was improving things. So that's a very positive sort of feedback. And the improvement comments, again, we'll get into those in detail, but many of the similar thoughts coming up. But keep that 72% in mind, and I'll make a point on the next slide about that as well. So the next slide, when we refer to this as sort of the money question, and the reason for this is most businesses, when they're trying to gauge customer satisfaction and customer loyalty, will ask this single question. how likely are you to recommend our product or service to a friend or relative? It's the single biggest predictor of customer satisfaction and customer loyalty. We used it in the context of resident satisfaction because it's such an important dimension. The numbers are very strong. 81% agree that they would recommend Esplanade to a friend or relative. Now, the psychology behind this is really key. You have to do two things to get that sort of high score. One is you have to validate your own decision that you made the decision to live here, in effect. And the second part of that is that you're actually recommending it to a friend or relative, so you're putting yourself and your reputation on the line. So given that context, an 80% score is very strong. And you can see some of the comments around that. Amazing place to live, great community, nice kudos to the board. But there are some things for improvement, and we'll definitely talk about that. So why don't you just keep those two reference points, 72%, 80%, as Cindy talks about the individual amenities. Thanks.
Okay, individual home landscaping. So this is our satisfaction slide, and I'll describe how to read it. We use the same format for all 18 amenities. And as you heard earlier, this amenity is ranked number 1 in importance and number 1 in dissatisfaction. So we read this table from left to right, and it's from very dissatisfied to very satisfied. In our research on how to design, develop, and analyze surveys, we learned a few things. First of all, whenever you have a dissatisfied response that's greater than 15% or higher, we circled that item to highlight the priority so that we could look for potential actions. We did that on each slide. In addition, if it's over 15%, we also looked at that middle section, neither satisfied or dissatisfied. What we learned is that we must pay attention to that because what that says is that the people who could not decide that they were satisfied or dissatisfied, they were not happy enough to be satisfied, and we considered that to be more on the negative side. So we circled that. Those three numbers on that table adds to 68%. You can see the number below that. And in looking at that, the way we describe the slide, it's 68% of the residents could not say they were satisfied, and that's the blue circle table, and that represents 750 residents. You get that number by looking at that far left column, or right column, and it's the sample size, and that's the number of respondents to the survey. Now, we had 1,218 people that responded to the survey, but they could skip questions. Frequency of use was one question they could not skip. That was a forced answer, but every other question could be skipped. So we had a fairly high amount of people interested in responding to this question at 1,101. So that's how we got the 750 respondents that could not say they were satisfied. We had 681 comments. So out of the 1,100 people, 681 made comments. And so that leads us to how did we evaluate and take all of the 681 comments and get it down to a smaller group and a consolidated group. And what we did is we were very fortunate to have a team of people that had different backgrounds and membership types that analyzed the data and the comments. And what we did with those 13,000 comments is we wanted to ensure that we consolidated them in a meaningful way and that we were taking verbatim comments and selected the phrases that most represented the sentiments of the community. We did this through some healthy debates and reminding each other that we are representing all members equally and leaving our own opinions on the table or out of the analysis. So most of the comments on this slide you'll see are about lawn maintenance, shrubs, and expectation of maintenance-free landscape care. And since that care is not meeting expectations, many of the residents are hiring outside services or performing the work themselves, thus that high dissatisfaction level. On the positive side, many noted that icon management improvement is underway, and 32% did say they were satisfied. Okay. Next slide, community infrastructure. This was rated number 3 in importance and has several sub-elements of concerns. Between 25 and 62% of the residents could not say they were satisfied. That represents between 300 and 700 people. These are the kinds of areas that are we see on an everyday basis. Main concerns were about safety and security related. Lighting was recommended as a number of times, preventing tripping hazards, things of that type. But mostly the comments were about lighting, guards, gates, roads, drainage, weeds, algae in the pond. And on the positive side, icons making improvements. Some people did say roads and gates were functional and that was good enough for them. Satisfaction, the satisfied side is 37 to 65% of those noted that icon is approving and they're satisfied. Next slide is the Bahama Bar. Did I? I did. Thank you. Okay, Culinary Center. It's ranked number 2 in importance with almost 1,100 responders. Between 36 and 53%, or 400 to 600 people, could not say that they were satisfied. Most improvement comments were on the acoustics, ambiance, hours, prices, and service. We did have some high satisfaction ratings on some of those elements, and you can see that this slide has the various elements. We call those subcategories. I'll get to that in a moment. But in some of those subcategories, we had 47 to 90% said that they were satisfied and they had high optimism for icon's improvement. And certainly the return to happy hour is a very, very high on the list and keeps people happy, right? On this slide, there's the several sub-elements I talked about. But what I wanted you to know is that all sub-level elements for all questions, whether or not we circle them or highlighted them, they've been captured for prioritization and potential improvement actions. So no worries if you have a high concern about a certain sub-element. It doesn't matter if they've been circled or highlighted. Everything's been captured for actions. Now, earlier, Krish referenced a grid where we have our team has helped with the budget planning. And that's where we took all of the sub-elements, as you're seeing here on this slide, and all the other amenities that have sub-elements. And we plotted those survey sub-elements with both the satisfaction level and importance rankings. And that was helping with prioritizing so that we could make better decisions. When you can see where everything stands in relation to each other, it's easy to understand where to focus your energies and time in a prioritized way. Okay, we talked about infrastructure. Now we're on Bahama Bar. Thanks for keeping me straight here. All right. Bahama Bar is ranked number 4 in importance, with between 35 and 56% who could not say that they were satisfied, translates to 400 to 600 responders. However, many believe that the Bahama Bar is the primary reason why they bought in this community. They wanted to share with their friends and family. They're very proud when they walk through the tropical pool area into the Bahama Bar. And when they first moved here, many said that it looked fresh and interesting, and they were proud of it. It's looking a little bit tired and worn at this time, and so there are many comments about updates and refreshing it. Other comments were on menu, hours, service, all need improvements. Even though we had 42 to 82% did say that they were satisfied. Okay, next slide is golf. Golf is ranked number 5 in importance. And with 38 to 46% who could not say that they were satisfied, represents between 300 and 350 responders. When you look at the sample size in that far right-hand column, this is a smaller subset of people that responded to this. This is about 730 people responded. That's about 2/3 of the total responders in our survey, indicating that there's fewer people interested in answering this question. However, it's interesting to note that 2/3 responders is approximately the same ratio as golf members to other members in our full community. Comments for improvements were on course conditions, staff training needs improving. They also thought putting locks in the restroom was a great idea to help with cleanliness. And And you'll hear this theme throughout this presentation, but many members are unhappy with how golf usage fees and revenues are supporting the HOA. Also, the reservation system is complicated and difficult to use. Next slide. This is satisfaction with guidelines, rules, and policies. We had 318 comments. 64% of the respondents agreed that the policies are satisfactory. 15% said they were not satisfied. There is some opportunity to be more consistent in its enforcement and allowing residents to comment before changes are made. Some said that the rules are good, some said they're too strict. Next slide. Okay. The survey findings that are posted on are going to be posted on the website. But what I wanted you to know is that I mentioned earlier that we have individual slides for each of the questions and the amenities. We just briefed several of them. The remainder of these are going to be listed that are listed on the slide are briefed in summary form in this presentation tonight. However, the full detail for individual slides will be included and posted on the community website. And we showed you how to read the slides and interpret the data. We made sure those slides are very standalone with all the details needed for understanding and reading that slide. Okay. Next slide.
Okay, these were some of the comments to the question that was asked around if you could make three recommendations to the board, what would they be? And so there were many comments around golf issues. Cindy touched on many of these: fees, conditions, the public-private debate, membership, the financial impact on the community, tee times, and drainage to homes from the golf course. Landscaping issues, individual residences, common area, individual problem resolution. Culinary center issues, menu, service, pricing, specials, extended hours, ambiance, acoustics, synergies with the Bahama Bar, and financial impact overall on the community. Bahama Bar issues, menu, service, pricing, extended hours, quality drink offerings, clean up and update the Bahama Bar, and the financial impact on the community. In terms of community issues, safety, lighting, rules enforcement, property value awareness, security, and communication. And HOA fees was one of the things that were included in the comments, although this was not a question that was asked elsewhere in the survey. But when it came to things that the community would like for the board to focus on, maintaining reasonable HOA fees came up often. Next slide, Krish. What we've learned, and some of this is redundant. Cindy covered it in a lot of the slides that she went through, and it's also each individual amenity will be available in the slide deck that will be available through the website. Landscaping opportunities, the various things of the Culinary Center and Bahama Bar changes, infrastructure. Next slide, Krish. Golf, again, some of the things that have already been touched on. HOA fees, review and communicate revenue expense impacts for fees for golf, food and beverage, HOA, and reserves. And then other activities that were recommended: review the lifestyle offerings and improve regular events and ensure space for all, which hopefully post-COVID we can get back to some of those things. Review fitness program offerings, fees, and address crowded conditions. Improve the upkeep of the pool areas, umbrellas, cushions, and towel service. Review additional courts and peripherals for tennis and pickleball. The gyms need to be reviewed in terms of equipment, space, access, and cleanliness, and address spa pricing, services, use, and booking and staffing. Next slide, Krish. So in terms of next steps and some of the actions that have already been taken, the board has already gone through this with the strategic planning group. So based on the feedback, what we found going through this is that many of the findings align with the developer deficiencies that we spoke about at our last board meeting, which are now called alleged construction defects. There was great alignment in many of those things. And so through the Taylor Morrison settlement, we will be able to address several high priority issues. The roads, as Dick touched on, in his presentation at the last meeting will be completed over the next 3 months. The acoustics remediation in the culinary center, the drainage impacting homeowners' property and bunkers, and some of that has already been addressed and will continue to address those based on the priority and the greatest needs. Insufficient lighting, specifically around the mailboxes, the Benito Gate, the amenities center, and the pickleball courts, and the amenities center flooring and windows. The board will also be taking the lead on major policy topics, governance, and communications, and in some cases, which I thought was a great recommendation by the strategic planning group, we will assign task force groups to address the issues more comprehensively where we feel like we need some additional support to accomplish that. And our hope is to include key stakeholders that have balanced resident representation across the community. As Krish mentioned earlier, he is planning some community meetings, which during those meetings, which will not be board meetings, they will be educational meetings focusing on revenue expenses and financial impacts in the fall. So stay tuned for those dates. We'll be communicating those shortly. Next slide, Krish. In terms of ICON, ICON will be addressing operational issues, and all of the ICON managers have been briefed on the survey results, as well as all of the managers have been given the comments of their respective departments. And they will be digging in to gain a deeper understanding of the issues around the comments that were provided. And all of the elements of the survey are captured into detailed action plans for the ICON managers. Some of the solutions that are underway, and we just listed a few here because ICON is going to be giving a presentation later on in mid to late September where they'll update the community on many more of these actions. But just some of the examples are listed here. Training of the guards, extending the Bahama Bar hours. As many of you have seen and commented, our golf course superintendent has developed a plan to improve and enhance the course conditions, and we're already seeing great results in the short period of time that he's been on board. From a golf operations perspective, they're currently, Aaron and his team are evaluating the current tee times, operations management software to make sure that we have the right software to most efficiently and effectively manage the golf course operations. So a lot of good things already well underway and more to come, again, as I mentioned, when ICON gives their update to the community later on in September.
Okay. So that concludes our presentation, and we'll take questions.
Well, the first comment on the feed is Cindy and Private. Great presentation. So
Okay. Thank
good
you.
way to start. We still have quite a few viewers, so if anybody has questions, now is certainly the time to put those into the system. Another comment of great information. Appreciate all the work. And our feed is, of course, runs about 20 to 25 second lag, so we might want to just give people a
Okay.
second to
Good.
publish their questions if they have them.
So we're sharing this slide about taking questions if later on, but we'll take them face to face right now.
We do have a question of when will there be follow-up surveys?
So our thinking is whenever it's needed. I mean, we've got a plethora of information, and we're still analyzing that information, of course, but if we find that there's some kind of a need for a short pulse survey or some short information where ICON says they'd like to make a decision to do this or that and have a couple decision points, we can go out with a quick survey and get that information. But the plan was initially that we would do this once a year and update it so we can compare year to year and look for improvements.
Great.
Yeah, I think that's a good timeline to kind of check back in and see our progress compared to, this is sort of the baseline of the results, so what's working well, what's not working so well. So if we do it again in a year from now, it'll be interesting to see where have we made improvements and where are we still falling short. So I think it's good directional information to help guide the decisions and actions of the board and ICON.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Sure. Pravat would like to add a thought.
Yeah, the thought is really that, and it ties to what Krish talked about, in terms of major capital improvements and so forth. The idea is once that is crystallized into some kind of a proposal or options for or addressing a particular capital need, the survey is a great vehicle to actually define that and then go out to the community and say, what do you think about that? Here are the cost implications, so on and so forth. So it's a very decision-making tool as well as a checking kind of tool, as Cindy and Sandy have just described.
Lots of comments coming in of kudos and thanks. Thanks for such a wonderful presentation. That could not have been easy dissecting all those surveys. We've got another one that says, thank you for a great presentation. Proud to be part of this community. Will the strategic group refer any specific issues to other groups, i.e. the golf group or IT group or so on?
Absolutely. We also, with all of the data that we have the ability to do the deeper dives and analyze the data in different ways. So as the groups look at this information and understand it, and of course ICON department managers, they're the ones with the power and authority to really make the changes, and of course the board. But we want to have an opportunity to support and help and give them the information they need. Absolutely.
Great.
I think we have one more slide, Cindy, on the.
Oh, yes. So if there's any questions that you have that you didn't bring up today, we put on the community experience feedback system. All you need to do is enter that feedback system, and you go just below the tutorial that pops up. When you say click here, it pops up a little menu, and you can select strategic planning, and that would direct your question directly to our group so that we can get a timely response to you.
Okay, so I want to thank, again, Cindy, Pravat, Jim, Tim, Maggie, and Frank for all of their efforts. If you see them in the community, please take the time to thank them. They have put in a lot of hours on behalf of the community. So thanks again for all your hard work. Greatly
Welcome.
appreciated.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you who stayed tuned in.
There was one other quick question. When any idea when the specific issues may be distributed to the groups? Any sort of timeline on that?
I'm not sure which specific issues, but
Well, just some of the areas that maybe need work.
we're going to put the rest of the slides. The slides will be put on the community website tomorrow.
Okay. Yep.
Okay.
Oh, great.
All right.
Okay. Wonderful.
Thanks, Cindy.
Sure.
Thank you.